Alright, what's going on today, YouTube? Welcome back to your favorite cyclist YouTube channel. This week we're talking about tubeless versus tubes and which one might be the best choice for you. But before we get into today's video, if you are new to my channel, make sure you head down below, hit that subscribe button for me. If you already are subscribed, make sure you hit that bell icon right next to that. That way you get notified every time I upload. That way you don't miss any of this awesome cycling content we got on this channel. So right on to the video, we're talking about tubeless versus tubes today. One of the big debates in mountain bikes, road bikes, gravel bikes, and all the bikes is which one is the one you want to run. So we'll start with this, start with a little background on me. So I have two of my bikes. Out of all of that, two of my bikes have tubeless, and that's going to be the Poseidon Redwood and my Trek Superfly, my mountain bikes. My gravel bike and my mountain bike have tubeless. The rest of them have tubes. So that gives me the experience of both riding with tubes and riding tubeless and be able to compare the two and my experience of what I've run into with both of those situations. So I remember back when tubeless started to become a thing, and it was the thing for mountain bikes. If you weren't running tubeless, everybody made fun of you for not running tubeless in your bike. And you could run stands and everybody thought it was the greatest thing ever. Well, fast forward about 8 years and I think a lot of people have realized that tubeless might not be all that was cracked up to be when it first came out. Now, tubeless, obviously a tubeless tire is going to be similar to what you run on your car. Cars don't have tubes in them for the most part, and that's who's work for cars, right? And the biggest thing is, cars have thicker rubber on the tires. That's the biggest difference between car tires and bike tires. Thicker rubber, not as thick rubber. So car tires take thorns and small stuff, no problem at all without getting a puncture. It has to be something long like a nail, a long screw, big piece of metal or something like that to actually get through the tire, which isn't that common when driving a car. Now for bikes on the other hand, those small things like thorns and little pieces of glass can get in your tire and puncture your tire. And that was one of the big things behind tubeless is no more punctures. You don't have to worry about getting a puncture in your tire because there's tubeless sealant inside of your tires that are going to seal up any holes in your tire. And that's where one of the problems with tubeless comes in. If you ask most people with tubeless, they'll say that there's going to be no punctures. That's one of the big benefits to running tubeless on my bike versus running tubes. And I would say that's a big thing for me is that I get less punctures than I would with the tube. And it's not that I get less punctures, I get less noticeable flats. And that's because of that sealant. Now obviously there are still things on the road and still thorns and stuff like that. They're going to make a big hole in your tire. Make a big enough hole that the sealant is not going to fill that up. I actually just repaired one on the Redwood that was a thorn that was just too big for the sealant to fill up. The sealant just rushed out and didn't seal it up at all. So I had to use a plug to get that fixed up. Now I've ridden that bike I don't know how many times and it's a gravel bike so it goes through fields and all that where there's thorns. Man, that's the first noticeable puncture I've gotten on this bike where I've lost air in it and notice that hey, my tire's losing air. Now if you compare that to other bikes like my fat bike where it just has tubes in it. If I run over the tiniest little thorn, it's going to puncture right through that tire and puncture that tube and that tube's going to go flat. It stands no chance against a thorn at all. Just a tire and tube isn't going to protect it against a thorn puncture. So you get less flats that you would notice. You still get punctures. This is still a thing. You still get punctures. They just seal themselves up. Probably 80% of the time they will seal themselves up and you won't even know that you got a small puncture in your tire. So is tubeless better in that case of punctures? Yes and no. There are ways with a tube where you can add extra protection. Whether that's adding like a slime or a sealant to your tube, that way it kind of functions as a tubeless tire where it will seal itself up or even you get a puncture. Adding a tire liner so that whatever punctured your tire won't even get to your tube and puncture that. That's a possibility as well. Running a heavier armored tire that's going to have more armor, thicker rubber to keep those punctures from getting to your tube. There are definitely ways to get around it with a tubed setup. Versus a tubeless setup, you kind of rely on the sealant as your kind of defense, I guess you could say, against noticing any of the punctures you get. Now tubeless really became a thing with mountain bikes first. And the other big deal with the tubeless was that you could run a lower tire pressure and not worry about pinch flats. If you run too low of a tire pressure in a tube tire, if you hit a rock or a curb just right and it pinches that tire down, that tube has a high potential of getting pinched between the wheel, tire, and the rock. There's a good chance of getting pinched, and that's when you get that snake bite puncture in your tube. And when that happens, guess what? You're replacing the tube pretty much, or you're doing two patches. It kind of sucks. Tubeless tires, you don't have tubes in there. So tubeless tires, you don't really have to worry about getting a pinch flat at all. You can run a much lower tire pressure in a tubeless tire than you can in a tube tire, which makes it very beneficial towards mountain biking or gravel cycling where you're off-road all the time. A lower tire pressure in general means it's going to be a more comfortable ride. Your tire is going to do a lot better job of soaking up the bumps and the little things on the road. It's also going to give you a little more traction as well, which is kind of a big thing when you're riding off-road, is getting that extra traction as much as you can. Especially when you're railing down the trail or ripping around corners, you want that extra traction so you don't slide out on your bike. It makes a big difference. So with those being two separate systems, tubeless and tubes, there are things you carry with both of them. Even if you run tubeless, you're still going to carry a spare tube with you. Your tire can either pop off the bead, you can get a flat that you can't repair. There's all sorts of things that can happen with a tubeless tire that you're still going to need a tube for. With a tube tire, you're still going to be carrying a tube as a spare, just in case you get a puncture. So you're still carrying like the same amount of stuff either way. You're still carrying a tube and the stuff you need to change a tube. You're still going to be carrying that whether you're tubeless or tube. Really the only additional thing you need if you're running tubeless is you want a plug kit with your tubeless. You're actually carrying an extra thing if you're running tubeless and you want to make sure you can cover all the bases. You have a plug kit so you can plug your tire if you get a big enough puncture that a sealant won't seal it up. So those are some of the basics of tubeless and tubes and kind of the benefits and drawbacks of each of those setups. Is tubeless right for you? You know, it might not be the best choice for you. Like I've said, if I was buy a newer bike these days, it's really a bigger battle whether I would go tubeless or not tubeless. Just because there's drawbacks to tubeless that really weren't promoted very well back when tubeless first came out. And a lot of people still don't talk about those drawbacks of running tubeless. So, is it the right choice for you? It may be. It's going to be up to you personally which one is going to be the right choice for your bike. In my opinion, if you're riding off-road with your bike, going tubeless makes a big difference just because it avoids constant punctures in your tire. It avoids the feeling of your tire constantly going flat. It seals them up for you. You don't have to worry about it. And in my opinion, if you're on the road, tubes work perfectly fine. You're not going to have a problem. You're not going to have as big of an issue on the road as you would riding off-road. So hopefully that helps you guys understand tubeless versus tubes. If it did help you or at least found this video entertaining, give this video a big thumbs up. Appreciate the support. Any comments or questions, let me know down in the comment section below. I love talking to you guys. Love answering any questions you guys have. And I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching today.